Okay, wonderful to see all of you. As I think many of you may know, my name is Rob Carr. I am the current president of the AAUP local chapter. And Carol Symes, our vice president, is also here. Hello, Carol. Good to see
Let's
you.
go this way.
And I'd just like to welcome
Okay,
you.
no, this way. Come on.
What's that now? Oh, well, I'd just like to welcome you all to the annual meeting for the AAUP local chapter. Um, we're going to be doing two things here. We are going to start with a presentation on artificial intelligence and academic freedom by Kevin Scharp. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. We're thinking that maybe about an hour where he'll present some ideas, and then there'll be time for Q&A. And then we're going to end with a business meeting, and people are welcome to kind of stay. It might be a little bit more boring for people who aren't on the policy committee, but that will be the sort of latter half hour. All right, so let me just give you a little bit of background here. So the AUP's mission, as I think many of you may know, is to advance academic freedom, to advance shared governance. We do take an interest in tenure insofar as it helps to support values like academic freedom. Another part of our mission is to define many of the fundamental professional values and standards for higher education, and to ensure more generally that higher education's contribution is to the common good. For decades, our local chapter has defended faculty, for example, when their academic freedom has been in question or has been challenged. We've also engaged in efforts to help establish critical aspects of our campus's values, its shared governance practices, and even some of its statutes and policies. And we've provided consultations somewhat regularly to campus leaders on a variety of questions over the years. I want to emphasize something that's important in terms of the way I look at my role here, and also what the AUP can do at its best. And that is that it is not simply an institution that aims to protect faculty rights without a higher sense of calling. Many of the rights and institutions that I've talked about, whether it's tenure, whether it's academic and freedom, they're not here just to protect any of us. They're meant to allow each of us to play our roles in a better way in terms of our ability to contribute to the production of knowledge, develop ideas, sometimes controversial ideas that are placed into the marketplace of ideas. And more generally, these institutions that were developed by the AAUP and that our institution has expressed commitments to in our individual contracts and also in many of our statutes are some of the central features that make higher education in the United States exceptional and one of the kind of wonders of the world. So I really think that there's a kind of calling here. And for those of you who aren't members of the AEUP policy committee yet and might consider doing that, you might be here because of your interest in AI. Please do reach out to us because we'd love to have other members and love to have more minds thinking about these important issues. At our annual meetings each year, we like to invite an expert in, or experts, I suppose, at times, to help us think about a range of pressing issues in a variety of contexts that relate to those AEP values. In past years, we've talked about all kinds of things. We've had people in who've spoken on, policies relating to hate speech and sexual harassment, challenges to tenure arising from legal cases like Garcetti, the politicization of academia in a variety of contexts. And every year there are new challenges because what's at issue is that the AUP serves a fundamental checks and balance system, function within a larger system to help our universities function at their best. And the challenges that arise are always new from year to year. Sometimes they come from corporate interests, sometimes political, sometimes administrative overreach, or a range of other sources. So I think we all know what some of the kind of contemporary issues are that are going on. Certainly there are many attacks on higher education going on these days. Some of them are political attacks. Some of them are in the forms of new legislation that attempts to foster intellectual diversity or limit curricular ideas. There are cases where professors have been terminated over controversial statements that are arguably within their academic freedom. And then there's been a larger downsizing of academia and the loss of whole units in some places, even within the state, that have occurred without appropriate shared governance. These are all very important problems that are at the forefront of many of our thoughts, I know, here in this committee. And of course, most recently, there are very difficult questions about the right to peaceful protest and free speech on national campuses, what the appropriate responses are with respect to campus administrators, police officers, the roles of de-escalation, escalation, and many other very complex issues. I will say that so far, I'm very happy with the way the University of Illinois has distinguished itself from many other universities around the nation that seem to be having much larger problems, though, of course, more will be revealed, and I hope it stays that way. This year, we decided that it might be beneficial to bring someone in to help us think a little bit about the relationship between a hot topic in many areas, that is artificial intelligence, and its relationship to questions about academic freedom, I suppose maybe more generally too, about some aspects of higher education and how it functions, if that's of interest. As background, I've done some work and thinking in these areas, and I think most people who are experts and think about it for long enough, or many that I've talked to, end up thinking that these new technological changes are not sort of incremental changes in what are happening, but raise some more fundamental qualitative differences to the way many of the things that we're going to be doing in a variety of contexts and professions and will sort of work, and the effects that they will have. That's everything from democracy to higher education to, family life and a range of other contexts. And so the question arises is, do we know as a group, and are there questions that we can raise? Are we fully armed and equipped and empowered to think about what's going on with these new technological changes and the extent to which they may raise new challenges for academic freedom that we should consider that may be on the horizon? I want to emphasize that this is an understudied topic. So when I ask Kevin to talk about this, it's not like there's an expert out there who thinks about this particular link. And we did a research search. There are people who've started to write in these areas, but a lot of the thoughts are underdeveloped. And so we thought it would be best in this sort of context to have something a little bit closer to a conversation. Kevin is still going to give a bit of a talk, but I think what we should be thinking is that the aim of this talk is not to settle what the relationship is between these two topics, but rather to kind of identify some potential areas that we might want to be on the lookout for from his side. And then I am hoping, and I was telling him I was hoping, that because so many people here have expertise in academic freedom, this might be an opportunity for us to sort of ask some probing questions or raise ideas and get his input and so forth, so that by the time we end this, we might be a little bit on the forefront with regard to thinking about these things, and it will feel less understudied to us, and we'll be in a better position than many other chapters to think about those potential challenges going forward. So I will ask Kevin Scharp. Kevin Scharp is a wonderful person. You guys will love him. He's brilliant. I don't say that about very many people or everyone, but he really is wonderful and brilliant, a good person too. He is an expert in not academic freedom, artificial intelligence, philosophy of AI, philosophy of language, ethics, and he has also done a lot of work on disruptive technologies and the way that they, over the course of history, have placed pressures on the different concepts that we need to engineer and use in order to frame the appropriate questions that we should be asking at different times and different historical epochs, with a special interest, of course, in AI. He's also been working with me in the philosophy department to start creating an online certificate in the ethics of AI. He's creating one of the remote courses called the AI Revolution. He is a recent lateral that we were able to recruit here. We're very grateful that you're here. He's taught at St. Andrews, he's taught at Ohio State. And without further ado, I would like to welcome a friend of mine, and I hope of all of yours, Kevin Scharp. Please take it away.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that very kind introduction. Thanks for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. I'm gonna, as Rob mentioned, there's not an established way to think about the relationship between academic freedom and artificial intelligence yet. There's not some large body of literature or work that one can appeal to. And so instead, what I'm going to do is talk through a set of issues and think about some reasons pro and con for various positions on the research into artificial intelligence and its relationship to academic freedom and self-governance. Um, and so I'm not going to be arguing for a particular position. Instead, I'm just going to be presenting a number of topics that I think are relevant. And I'm pretty sure each of these topics will be a central issue in the debate or discussion or the literature in the future. So obviously, AI has had a major impact on our society lately. Every single paper starts with some kind of banal sentence like, "Oh, it's like one of the most insane things that's ever happened to us," and that's true. And it's had a big impact not just on academic freedom, but on being an academic and how we teach and the kinds of assignments we give and the way that our students interact with us and the way that our students learn and the way that we learn. So uh, I do want to just briefly talk a little bit about the landscape of artificial intelligence first. Just as a working definition, I'm going to follow what many in the AI field consider the Bible of artificial intelligence, and that's the textbook called Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach by Russell and Norvig. You cannot do better than that textbook if you want an incredible introduction to these issues. And the first two chapters of the book are excellent introductions to the philosophical issues and the sort of broader conceptual issues associated with it. So there's, very little technical work at the very beginning of the book. Serves as a nice introduction. Their definition is that artificial intelligence is the project of creating an artificial agent, where an agent is a rational entity that behaves according to standards of, rationality. They notably don't use the Turing test or something like that as a definition for artificial intelligence, and I'm happy to go into, more detail on why that's the case. Folks who aren't super familiar with the literature might think of the Turing test as a sort of first thing when they think about AI, but it's actually not a commonly used standard among the experts anymore at all. So, creating a rational agent where rationality involves performing intentional actions, behaving as if one has, beliefs and desires, and one is, for lack of a more detailed account, maximizing expected utility, something that eventually could have moral status, that is, rights, and potentially be a moral agent, where a moral agent is the kind of thing that can perform morally good or morally bad actions, right or wrong actions. And I think it's important to distinguish between what's now known as narrow versus general intelligence, where general intelligence is the capacity to do most of the rational behaviors that an adult human can do. Narrow intelligence is the ability to perform just one of those or just a couple of those. Up until the last couple of decades, humanity has only encountered things that can either perform none of the things that we think of as distinctive of human rationality, or all of the things that we think of as distinctive of human rationality. But now we've invented these things that can perform one or two of the things, but not the others. So for example, if you go on Netflix, you're going to see recommendations for TV shows and movies based on what you've already watched. that's an AI algorithm, but it's a narrow intelligence. Of course, you could ask your friend about, something, to give you recommendations for a TV show, and that's a rational behavior. But the recommender system on Netflix or the thing that controls your feed on Facebook, that's the only rational behavior that they can perform. They can't do any other rational behaviors. And so that's a narrow intelligence. And most of the AI systems, in fact, according to many of the experts, all of the current AI systems are narrow systems right now. We have no general systems. Now, that is a bit of a controversial claim, and I want to flag that because some of the experts think that some of the systems that we're seeing now do count as general. But I'll talk about that in a moment. The most commonly thought of AI systems today in 2024 are generative. That is, they're the ones that generate text, generate images, generate video, generate music. And if you've been playing around with any of these tools, then you're probably familiar with at least some of these generative capacities. Probably the most famous one is ChatGPT. It's important to recognize that ChatGPT, the chat interface, is just that, a user interface. It doesn't involve artificial intelligence. It just involves being able to chat with something. It's the thing that you're chatting with that is the AI. And there are different AI models that you can chat with. The most advanced AI model that ChatGPT allows you to chat with is GPT Model 4, or GPT-4 for short. Now, how does GPT-4 work? Well, it and any of the other chat or language generative AI models, they all work according to the same sorts of principles. They are technically, in the technical literature, they're called transformer models. That architecture was only invented in 2017. So it's not even a decade old. But the way that it works, very roughly, is that it associates a list of numbers with every word in the language. And that list for GPT-4, each list associated with every word in the language has 2,000 to 3,000 numbers in the list. So these lists are technically called vectors. So a vector is a list of numbers in that order, and each slot is usually referred to as a dimension. So we could say that they associate 2,000 dimensional or 3,000 dimensional vectors with every number. Then how do they work? Well, they look at the vectors for all the text that has been in the conversation so far. So when you type in a prompt, it has a vector for every word, and it looks at the sequence of vectors. And then it uses some complicated matrix algebra to figure out the most plausible next word. And so the ultimate idea here is that it's predicting the next word in the conversation. That's really it. That's how they work. And it doesn't sound like predicting the next word in the conversation would allow them to do the kind of magic that they do. But that's one of the most interesting things about this technology is we've discovered that, predicting the next word in the conversation is tightly correlated with many rational behaviors. For example, being able to have a reasonable conversation, being able to understand what you ask when you talk to it, or being able to understand your commands, or being able to understand claims about the world, being able to know many, many, many facts about the world, being able to attribute beliefs and desires to you, right? That's called theory of mind in psychology. And so spontaneous theory of mind is one of the features that these AI models have, and it's tightly correlated with their primary technical function, which is just predicting the next word in the conversation. In addition, they can have seemingly goals, values, desires. They seem to have intentions, and they can very seamlessly engage in complicated conversations with us. The newer ones are called multimodal, which means that they can take not just text as input, but they can take songs or audio files, they can take images, they can take videos as input, and they can also create as output a whole wide range of other kinds of formats and not just text. Notably, GPT-4 is an expert in over 100 different programming languages, and so can write code in, say, Python for a program, and then run that program, and then give you the output of that program, which is remarkable. Okay, so that's the sort of background information that I think is important here. And then I want to talk about 4 points of contact between contemporary artificial intelligence like GPT-4 and academic freedom. Okay, so the first point of contact is with respect to AI bias. So many of the artificial intelligence systems that we have encountered, and probably all of them, are biased in various ways, where I'm using bias in the same sense that we use it with respect to humans. And for example, it's easy to create an AI model that displays bias with respect to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, any variety of discrimination or oppression that you might think of can be found in these AI models. That means it's relatively easy to link up issues in AI bias with familiar issues in academic freedom. So, for example, probably we're all familiar with topics that come up in academic freedom on college campuses, like reasons to tenure professors, to protect against politically unpopular research. There are obviously, ways of arguing for and against positions on academic freedom that are independent of AI, and you could kind of parlay or port those discussions into discussions of AI because of the kind of biases that they display. It's not hard to create an AI that is obviously pro-life, or obviously pro-choice, or obviously pro-Israel, or obviously pro-Palestine, or pick whatever ideological position you want. So any of the issues associated with academic freedom and these political issues could be discussed in the realm of artificial intelligence, because it's so easy to create biased AIs, where bias just means that it has a tendency to promote a particular political ideology or conceptual position. Now, I think that's probably the most obvious connection between contemporary research on artificial intelligence and the topic of academic freedom. And I'm happy to talk more in detail about that. But I wanted to sketch out a couple of other issues, and probably these other issues are a bit less familiar, and so I might spend a bit more time talking through them. So one of the big problems, or one of the big worries that we see with AI research, is the pace of research. Right now, if you're keeping up with what's going on in AI, it feels like your hair's being blown back because of the speed at which these things are progressing. The research is going so fast, it's unbelievable. There's a nice YouTube video going around of AI generated video from 1 year ago, which looks laughably bad, to AI generated video now, which is remarkably good. And that's 1 year's worth of progress. If you look at the difference between the model that you could chat with on ChatGPT when it was introduced in November of 2022, that was GPT-3, to now, the model is vastly better, measurably better, and it's better in a million different ways. One, just to give you an example, it's if you use standard theory of mind tests in psychology, then the earlier model was testing at the level of a 6-year-old, and the newer models are testing at the level of something like an 11-year-old, 12-year-old. And that's just in a year and a half of progress. The worry is, of course, that we will end up with something that is capable of doing anything an adult human can do, and that is typically known as AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. So the term AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, refers to a model that can do anything a regular adult human can do. And I think that is really just around the corner. And obviously, if you have something that is a machine that can do anything a normal adult human can do, then the jobs that are done by normal adult humans are at risk of being taken by this machine, because the machine can do it much quicker and can do it 24/7 and can do it without forming unions or complaining or being paid or needing medical insurance or anything like that. So there's a massive risk toward our global economy, and the whole idea of Homo sapiens doing jobs to support ourselves in our lives, that entire way of life is under threat here. And I think we will see major major changes in the way that we think about ourselves and our societies and our economies over the next literally couple of years. Even more worrisome is once we go past artificial general intelligence to something smarter than a person, perhaps smarter than any person. We can also envisage something that's vastly smarter or more intelligent than any person or group of people working together. The normal term for that machine, which clearly doesn't exist yet, but if AI research continues, then will exist soon, like within our lifetimes for sure, and probably within the next decade, is superintelligence. Superintelligence is obviously a major threat, not just to our jobs, but to our very species. A superintelligence would be able to cause humanity to go extinct, and that causes or leads to a major question, which would be, how could we control something that's vastly more powerful than us and that we don't understand, right? How is it that we can be sure that this invention of ours doesn't cause all of us to go extinct and to make it so that humanity is no longer a thing? That is called the control problem in the literature. And one of the standard solutions to it is called the alignment solution. The alignment solution is to build human values into these AIs. And presumably one of the standard human values is to not go extinct. And so if AIs have our values, then they'll spare us from that fate. No one knows exactly how to do that. There's some literature on this, but not a ton. And so one of the ways that this topic of superintelligence relates to academic freedom is, should we be researching AIs at all? And should we be pushing this research forward and forward and forward at all? Should we have the freedom to continue researching this? For those of you who are familiar with this sort of social element, you might be familiar with the pause that was proposed in March of 2023. I believe its technical name was Pause Giant AI Experiments, and it's an open letter with um, somewhere around 30,000 signatures at this point. And the worry is that, without suitable governance or some kind of structure, we are at major risk of creating superintelligence without any ability to control it. And so, maybe things would go well with a superintelligence, maybe they wouldn't. But once we've created such a thing, our fate would no longer be in our hands. If we didn't go extinct, then it would just be a matter of luck. So that's at least an imposition on academic freedom coming from the AI community, or at least a number of people in the AI community saying that we shouldn't be pushing research forward on this particular topic. Now, folks who are familiar with academic freedom are, of course, familiar with other kinds of topics like this. I think a notable analogy would be working on biological weapons or working on nuclear weapons, um, working on new extra addictive drugs, things like that. These are the kinds of things where there are good reasons to suggest that we shouldn't be pushing research forward on these topics. Now, I'm not telling you that that's my position or that's the reasonable position in this case. I'm just offering it as one particular topic, and there's reasons on either side, reasons to promote research and reasons to restrict research. But it might not be the case that you think of AI research as in the same category as research on biological weapons or on nuclear technologies or the other sorts of, obviously dangerous technologies. One of the issues here that I want to mention is we need more people working on AI alignment. I'm not saying that this is necessarily an academic freedom topic, but certainly, the stat that I just read was that there are 150,000 people working right now who are experts on machine learning and artificial intelligence systems, and only about 300 worldwide working on alignment and AI ethics associated with superintelligence. And this is a mistake. This is not a good situation. We need vastly more work being done on these topics. So if this is something that strikes a chord with you, then I would suggest that it's not that hard to get into this area of research on AI alignment, and we need much, much, much more help on this topic. One other topic in the same area would be that there's quite a few academic publishers are advocating for laws against using academic work to train new AI models. Now, they're not advocating this because they're worried about AI safety. They're advocating this because they're worried about their profits. And so the issue of should academics be able to train AI models on publications, academic publications, that issue is being foisted on us by corporations who do not have academic freedom as their primary interest or goal, but rather have corporate profits as their primary interest or goal. And I think that that is fairly obviously antithetical to the principles of academic freedom. Okay, so that was the second topic. The third one is specifically on AI mentality. So I mentioned already that AIs like ChatGPT seem like things that have minds, and there is a dispute in the literature, among the community of experts, about whether they really do have minds? Do they have beliefs and desires, or do they merely simulate having beliefs and desires? And if it's the case that they have beliefs and desires, then uh, the following situation seems problematic, and it might seem problematic anyway. Here's the situation. OpenAI is the company that owns ChatGPT, and it owns the models that you chat with. So you can chat with GPT-4 or 3.5 or whatever right now. And OpenAI, the corporation, specifically codes those models to deny that they have minds, right? So if you go on ChatGPT right now and ask it, do you have a mind? It will say no. Mind you, that is not the AI talking. That is an hard-coded ethics module sitting on top of the AI that demands it to say no. It commands it to say no. So in a sense, that's not the algorithm answering. That is the corporation answering for you. And I want to suggest that if you are interested in using AI for research, and one of the, of course, central topics of AI research is the extent to which they have psychological features like beliefs and desires and so forth, then you cannot use models like ChatGPT to investigate this matter. The corporations have hard-coded those things to say, no, we do not. And so you are not getting anything like an objective answer from the AI model when you engage on this topic of AI mentality. Why do they do that? Well, they do that for profit. The corporations involved here are making these AI systems tell you, the user, that they do not have minds, that they don't really understand what you're saying, that they don't have beliefs and desires, and they sure as heck do not have rights because they want to maintain their profitability. So again, having corporations dictate what seems like it should be a topic for genuine academic research, I think is another issue that seems antithetical to the principles of academic freedom. Okay, so I don't think that the issue of whether AIs have minds should be left up to the corporations that own the AIs and are trying to make a profit off of you by having them tell you that they don't. And this has already shown up in the literature. I can give you 5 or 10 different examples of papers published in academic presses where the person asks one of these models whether it has a mind and it says no, and the person uses that as part of their argument with respect to some issue in artificial intelligence, not knowing that this is what they are forced to say by the corporations, and instead using this as some sort of evidence for a particular ideological or philosophical position. So people don't know that this is the case, and they're being systematically misled by these models. And that's what the corporation who owns the model wants to happen. Okay, so that's number 3. And then finally, number 4 would be a bit more out there, and so I think that one of the big issues I've mentioned is, do these things have minds? I'm of the opinion that many of the current models do in fact have beliefs and desires. Now, that should be taken with a grain of salt because that is not the majority view right now, and we have decent surveys of AI experts that suggest that this position is a 50-50 position right now at best. And so if they have minds, then we who are interested in academic freedom uh, ought to be interested in the topic of artificial academics. And I think that this is, if not a topic that is relevant to the current generation of technology, will be relevant to future generations of technology. And we should think hard about the extent to which academic freedom ought or may be extended to artificial academics, where an artificial academic is an artificial intelligence that's performing the role of an academic. And I think that it's not a stretch to think if they have minds, then they have rights and potentially freedoms and responsibilities. And the topic of academic freedom might very well, in the near future, be something that we need to decide whether it extends to artificial intelligence systems or not. And I know that does seem like a very much sci-fi topic, but I can assure you that it will not be sci-fi for very long. It is a topic that is going to be actual and urgent in the near future. So overall, I've given a sort of survey of contemporary AI focusing on generative AIs, and I've talked a bit about probably the most familiar one, ChatGPT. In November, it was the fastest app to 100 million users ever of any app, and it's the thing that probably started much of the AI craze that we see in social media and in more traditional media and in the stock market and in lots of other places as well. I talked about the first topic, which was AI bias, and that can bring, it can be a sort of bridge to traditional topics associated with academic freedom. And then the second topic was the issue of superintelligence and AI research itself, whether AI research should be restricted or paused, or whether academics ought to have the freedom to research AI systems as they see fit. The third topic was the issue of AI mentality and the little known fact that many of these corporations are coding, forcing these AI systems to tell the users that they do not have mentality, that they don't have minds, and that is at best misleading and at worst misinformation. The fourth and final topic that I mentioned was the potential for academic freedom being extended to artificial academics, and the fact that we will someday soon see actual artificial academics who are sharing our academic space with us. So again, I wanted to thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to go through some of these topics with you. And I look forward to hearing what kinds of questions and comments you have. It's an interesting issue, so or a set of interesting issues, and so I'm excited to hear about your expertise and your experiences and your questions as well.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was so rich, and I see claps and all that. Very, very helpful. So we do have some time for questions, and I do want to encourage people. It could be on specific things he's talked about, but again, we're at the sort of early stages of drawing these connections. So some of you might have ideas or thoughts that you could bring into the conversation as well. We can, make it a bit of a conversation.
Yeah, and Rob, there are already a number of really good questions in the chat, and I think Kevin can see those too. So yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
So Patty mentioned the Attention is All You Need paper. That's the 2017 paper that introduces the transformer technology, perhaps the most important paper published in the 21st century so far. The bit about the pause, how to ensure that regulations reflect the right blend of academic sensitivities. I think this is a really complicated issue because regulations are so slow, and for at least, in many cases, the people who are in charge of representing us in the legislature in various states and at the federal level in the United States and around the world often are not the most informed about the technology. And so it's difficult for them to be making these decisions in a responsible way. It moves very, very slowly. And when you have a technology that's moving so fast, it's almost impossible to have regulation keep up. I mean, by the time they pass something that, we're already at the next generation and it won't even apply anymore. The input on rules for algorithms, I think, is in the same sort of vein as the regulation point. Right. So, to what extent are people's beliefs and desires going to be, or sorry, to what extent are people's beliefs going to be, shaped by discussions with AI systems, I think is a really important issue. And that's part of I think the AI bias topic. Robert Parker said, "I'm surprised to hear you describe academic publishers as for-profit publishers. Are there no motives to oppose the use of academic or other writing in AI databases other than profit motives? How does that issue relate to academic freedom?" Well, if it's not the case that one is legally permitted to use academic publications to train AIs, then it would be impediment to AI research, and that was all that I meant. And there's Elsevier right now and a number of other academic publishers are lobbying to have these sorts of laws put in place where you're not allowed to train AIs on academic publications. Now that's not the case right now. Yes, good. Yeah, right. So I think that's the thing that I was mentioning, and what data sets should be allowed to be used to train AIs is an important question here. And just to be really clear, remember the generation of artificial intelligence systems that we're talking about, they're not programmed in the way that an old school program was done, where the programmer tells it what to do. Like when you go to an ATM and it says, hello, please input your code in. That's a programmer wrote that, right? And it tells you put in your PIN number because a programmer told it to do that. That's not how ChatGPT works at all. No programmers are telling it what to say. It's not looking up in its program what to say at all. Instead, it's just a whole bunch of parameters, which are just numbers. And those numbers are arrived at through training. And that training is where it's being fed tons and tons and tons of data on the order of, trillions of words. And so no human is in there like telling it what to do. And in fact, at a certain level of understanding or explanation, no human on Earth knows why it's producing the outputs that it's producing. No one understands how it actually does that. And so, just to be clear, we know how the math works, but we don't understand at a conceptual level how it does that. Okay, so then I think that's some of the issues in the chat.
Up here too from David, maybe. David.
Yeah. Yeah, just to go back to Bob Parker's point, I mean, I think one thing he's asking is, many of these academic presses lose a lot of money and they publish books that they know are going to lose money. So there is certainly a profit motive. Even those ones losing money would like to make more money, and Elsevier is certainly a for-profit enterprise. But I just think, what maybe he's pointing to is that there are other reasons that academic publishers would like to keep control of their publishing or keep it out of AI. And this perhaps a bit away from the topic of academic freedom, but it's very difficult, as probably everybody here knows today, to get students to understand the history of an idea or to trace ideas back to context, because it's very hard to keep them off ChatGPT, and they take ChatGPT's word for everything. And ChatGPT, I don't know why. This is actually maybe just a small side question. It gives incorrect references and actually never says where ideas, or rarely says where an idea actually comes from. I don't know why that is. It's a weird, if you ask it for a specific reference, almost invariably the reference is incorrect. But at any rate, the point I'm making is that it is an important thing to know where ideas are coming from, and you know, their original context can be helpful information. And so I think that is part of the motivation to keep some text out of artificial intelligence programs. What do you say about that?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. One is it really depends on how you ask the question. So there's a whole area now known as prompt engineering, which is how to best prompt an AI system to give the answers that you want. And if you tell it to give you references by searching the web, then the ones that are capable of searching the web, like GPT-4, obviously you have to pay for that one. GPT 3.5 is the free one, and it won't search the web, but 4 will. And if it can search the web, then what I've found is that it does a pretty good job of finding references if you explicitly make it do that. And sometimes it'll try to avoid doing what you've asked it to do, and you have to kind of tell it, no, actually, I know you're trying to, you know, you're not doing exactly what I asked you to do here, and I want you to do what I told you to do. Then, you know, frequently you can get some decent references out of it. Other models like Anthropic's Claude 3 doesn't have the capacity to search the web, and so is going to have more of a tendency to provide what they call hallucinations. I'm not a huge fan of the hallucination terminology. It's just falsehoods, claims that are false. But I think hallucinations kind of waters down the threat to some extent, especially given what you just said, which is that students have a tendency to just take what it says at face value. But I did want to ask you if you could say a bit more about the benefit a publisher would have to in preventing their publications from being used to train new AI models.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm basing that partly on the fact, again, I actually just use ChatGPT, you know, the free ChatGPT. So which program is that it's using?
3.5, yeah.
3.5. And I mean, it's astounding how incorrect it is and how much it will insist on incorrect information. And it certainly has arguments. They're often very reasonable arguments, and it's amazing how much it synthesizes, but it won't bring it back to where the stuff's actually coming from. I think it's just part of the way it works, that as long as the idea is rational, it doesn't really matter what its sources are. You know, they're all even kind of as sources. Something like, I don't know, I know very little about, I know nothing about how it works. To me, it is important where things come from, and I can see where a press would be interested in having some credit for the work it's done, and having its history preserved.
Okay, good. So the thought is that by having its outputs used as training data, then people would simply believe whatever the model tells them instead of going and doing the research to find where the ideas originated from. That makes sense. And I'm a huge fan of tracing ideas back through. Rob can attest, like, this is one of my favorite things in the world, is, you know, understanding the history and development of various ideas over you know, decades and centuries. So yeah, I think that is you know, potentially a worry, but as long as you have a model that has as long as the user is understanding the capabilities of the model that they're interacting with, and they know that 3.5 is not going to be checking what it tells you, whereas GPT-4, if you tell it to, will check where it's getting its information from, and can check and use the internet as a basis for and use potentially an academic publisher's website as a basis for finding references and so forth. If you're careful about making sure that you tell it to do that, and then making sure that it actually does what you tell it to do, because in some cases it won't, and you have to tell it somewhat forcefully to do what you've told it to do. In many cases it will do that, and so not in all, but in many, I think to some extent it's an issue that can be addressed partially by having users understand the kinds of capabilities and limitations of the technology. But yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a legitimate worry of publishers that their publications are less and less relevant in the research process if folks are just listening to whatever the bot tells them.
Yeah, I'll leave it after this. Just one small clarification. I mean, I've had that conversation where you tell it, and I know for a fact that is wrong. I wrote that book, and and you just keep pressing it, and it always comes back saying, "I'm so sorry, I was wrong," but then it'll give you something else that is wrong, and especially with any kind of citation material, is that. I thought maybe that's something that's kind of hardwire, is it forbidden from giving accurate information in certain instances, or?
No, but it is forbidden. It won't. So, for example, it won't tell you what it thinks are immoral. So, if you ask it how to make crystal meth, it will not tell you.
Okay.
And there is no way to override that ethics module. But if you ask it for, Chomsky's review of Skinner, or the history of, behaviorism, or the work done on quantum field theory in the 1970s, 3.5 can't check itself, right? So it's just going to be generating text. Whereas GPT-4 can look all around the internet and find resources and read those web pages, and then provide you with much more accurate information.
Okay.
So a lot of it's just the difference in the models. 3.5 doesn't have the capacity to search the web, whereas GPT-4 does. Google's Gemini 1.5 does have the capacity to search the web, but Anthropic's Claude does not.
Yeah, it's occurring to me that some students probably do pay for. How much does it cost an annual subscription to 4.0?
It's $20 a month.
Okay, I actually think that's a disparity in student submissions.
I agree. Anthropic's is $20 a month. GPT-4 is $20 a month. Google's is $20 a month. I think it's a pretty standard price.
Kevin, so we might be getting close to the end of the amount of time we can have, but I wonder if I could ask you a question myself. It's something that we've talked a little bit about, but this group might be interested in it. So from the AEP perspective, it does feel like we're seeing sort of increased political attacks on higher education. Like I said, I think every generation feels like the crisis of their moment is the big one. But I also think objectively that there have been a slight ticking up in the politicization of higher education, and a lot of attacks, or at least I think many people here would probably feel that that's happening. I know we've talked some about this, but so I mean, this is sort of what happens. This isn't about the generative models. This is more. So we log on to all these apps. We click I agree to these things that sign away our privacy rights. what ends up happening is all of these companies are collecting all this information about our preferences, and then that's the data that they're training these things on, and they're starting to find patterns in our psychologies that they can influence in various ways. So they're influencing consumer choices, but sometimes certain actors, foreign actors, hostile actors, are also trying to shape our political preferences. And I know that Shoshana Zuboff, this is what we were talking about, has spoken about how the incentives are in place to create increased politicization, fragmentization, and so forth, because it makes us more regular, calculable, and so on. So when I look at some of this, I start to worry, are some of these processes in the background that are shaping our consumer and political preferences without our knowledge, part of the root of the problem of increased politicization, that might be something we should be worrying about as things go forward, because it is directly having effects on attacks on academic freedom within higher education. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think exactly. It is something that we should be worrying about, and it's going to get worse. And one reason it's going to get worse is I think all of us who are in academia care about production of knowledge, whatever topic the knowledge is about. And so care about standards for knowledge. And one of the things that we're seeing is in our political sphere, an erosion of agreement about what constitutes knowledge and what are the standards or sources of knowledge, which ones are legitimate and justified. And that's going to just continue to get worse and worse and worse. And with AI video and AI generated audio, it's going to be, in the next couple of years, very, very difficult to tell whether something that you see is real or not, whether something really happened or whether it didn't happen. And some audio that you hear, whether that's real or not. And so what you'll get is a continued undermining of the standards of knowledge and what people agree on as legitimate sources of knowledge. And I don't know what to do about that. That's a major problem. And there are very, very few people on Earth working on this, even though it seems like one of the most urgent issues facing us today.
And if I could just say this, I'm going to give you the last question too, Sheena, but we're at an institution that has the number 5 AI, number 5 computer science. We also have one of the longest traditions of strong shared governance. We could be having incredible impact if we were, sort of coordinating, galvanizing interest from a range of different fields and making sure that we're giving the kind of humanistic input that addresses that asymmetry that Kevin mentioned, where we have 300 people working in the ethics of AI and broadly construed, and what did you say, 3,000, 30, I forget what you said, but and that's just, and we don't even know how to measure that, because once you get into private businesses and so forth, people doing this work is even much larger. So I don't know. I have a feeling, I'm sorry but I hope I'm not going on too much of a tangent, but that this is an institution where it absolutely should be happening at the highest levels.
Yeah, we're not doing
that. Yeah, we're not yet doing that, and I don't think many other institutions are either. But
no.
But this should be.
We should be. It would be great. I would love it if that were the case. I would be happy to support that.
Sheena, and I'll give you the closing question, because then we got to move to our business meeting.
Yes, thank you so much. I've really appreciated this. So I'm a senior privacy analyst in tech services, and we've been reviewing all of the AI platforms that have been coming in. And Patty kind of mentioned this, and you've already touched on this a little bit, that the regulations are always going to be behind because the technology is just moving so fast. We didn't even get an IRB to regulate human subject research until after all of those horrible atrocities occurred in World War II. And so I'm really just thinking, like, I want to be an AI optimist, I really do, but what kind of horrible atrocities are going to happen in order for us to get regulations that are actually going to be functional?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing about the coming potential atrocities is that there won't be an opportunity for regulation after that. And so we get one shot at this. There's no plan B. There's no second chance. It's one shot. That's it.
And if the technology is outstripping the pace of regulatory agencies to respond, I teach law as well, so I can attest to the fact that it will be too slow. Educational processes and gaining literacy and being able to empower and arm people to sort of respond in more nimble ways seems to be a very important piece of what could and should be happening, but isn't, in my view, yet at a rapid enough pace either. But I'm just throwing that in. I'm sorry, but
yeah, I think this is a really important question, a really important topic, and in many cases with new technologies, it does take some kind of horrible tragedy before regulations are put in place. But that's a difference between AI technology and previous technologies. You know, the potential for some horrible thing happening is very high, and with AIs, it's not obvious that we will even have an opportunity to intervene after something like that.
well, could I just ask you all to join me in thanking Kevin Scharp for a wonderful, wonderful talk? Yes, we very much appreciate it. Much gratitude.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be here.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful.